to Dover, England. But when we got to Cologne, Germany, we discovered that the railroads from Cologne to Calais were on strike, and we couldn't get through that way. We had to spend the night in Cologne. That night was really some experience, but there is not enough time on this tape to tell you about it now. We had to return to Abbey and start anew, this time by the way of Paris, the Havre, then across the Channel to Southampton, England. We arrived at Le Havre at night, but there were no ships across the Channel until the next morning. So we spent the night at a French cafe. We arrived in Southampton about noon the next day and caught the first train for London, where we spent a few days, living at a YMCA hut on the Strand. We did quite a bit of sightseeing during those few days, visiting many places of interest, and even took in a stage show while there. We visited Westminster Abbey, the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace, and many other places of interest. We even crossed the famous London Bridge. We made the trip to Glasgow by the way of the London Great Northern Railway, and the name of our train was the Flying Scotchman. And I mean it really traveled, stopping only once between London and Glasgow. Brother Bill was afraid the train was going so fast that it might run off of the island. Upon our arrival in Glasgow, we stayed at another YMCA place. We had a time finding where the kinfolks lived, but finally made it. We stayed with them for one day, then headed back to our base in Germany. My cousin, Maggie McCormick, was from Castletown, Scotland, where they spoke fluent English. But her husband, a native of Glasgow, was a typical Scotsman, and we couldn't understand a cockeyed thing he was saying. He took us out into Alexander Park to show us around while Cousin Maggie was preparing dinner, and he talked all the time, but still we couldn't understand what he was talking about, until at one time he said, "Time to again head a hoose new." I told Bill, I guess the old man was saying, it's time to go back to the house. Well, that trip alone would fill another book, but can't talk about all those experiences now. Anyway, we left Germany about the middle of April 1919 for Brest, France, where we embarked for our trip back home. This time we sailed on the Leviathan, the largest ship afloat at the time. It carried 22 to 25,000 troops and a crew of 2,000. I trust that the little I have told you was of some interest. If you wish to know more about my division, I would suggest that you read the history book. But of course, like I say, it will not tell you about my personal experiences, which are entirely too many to write about. I might tell you that of the 250 members of the military police company, only 27 remain. Well, I don't think I'd be around long enough to tell you about all that went on and happened while I was in France and Germany. So we'll call it quits for this time. Your granddaddy, Charles E. Reed.